Yeah. Hello, everybody. Welcome. I'm Allie Duzette, and this is Naomi Fox Reyna. And in real time, we just recorded a video about the full moon that's coming right up. And I had talked about a story where from when I was in high school, and she said, "Oh, there's a lot of astrological significance to this story." And as we were talking about, I thought, no, we have to record this because pretty much everyone watching has probably been through high school, and many of us have children that are going through high school. And so I wanted to kind of bring a lot of this information to everybody's minds so that I think it just adds a lot more context to everything. So you can understand your teenage child as they are going through all of the weird stuff that they go through. So the story that I told, to recap, was how my high school schedule was a super disaster, even though I kept praying, like, make sure I have the right schedule, God, make sure my schedule is so great. And it was so bad. And then at the very end of my high school career in January of my junior year, I felt like God said, you have to graduate in 4 months from now, ready, set, go. And I was able to, specifically because of all the horrible scheduling conflicts that I had had over the previous years. And Naomi pointed out, this was actually a Saturn opposition. And I
Mhm.
had never thought about that at all. So, Naomi, let's hear it. Talk about this Saturn opposition for all the little freshmen out there.
I think that the life transits that we go through are some of the most fascinating uh, aspects of astrology, and they provide tremendous support as we're emotionally processing things, especially retroactively, to like look back and then also to look and see like what are our children potentially going through. But there are built-in transits that happen for every person in a similar timing. It's not always identical, but similar timing, and it's all timed out from the moment you take your first breath. So Allie was sharing at 14, she started ninth grade on her 14th birthday. And then she had like the super worst schedule ever. And then the next year was the super worst schedule ever. And whenever anybody's telling a story and I hear something about timing, I've been given the title Queen of Timing because I'm very attuned to timing. And being an astrologer, it definitely activates that even more. And so anytime I hear something in a cycle, in a timeline, I'm like, ooh, what planet is keeping the timetable for that? Because the planets don't tell us who we are. They don't change our energy. They're the timekeepers. And so Saturn is a timekeeper on a 28-year-ish cycle, 28, 29-year-ish cycle. And so anytime you're dealing with something in about 7-year cycles, you're probably dealing with something with Saturn because it starts at a point and then after 7 years moves 90 degrees and that creates an activation and then moves another 90 degrees, which makes it opposing and then moves another 90 degrees 7 years later. And then it's squaring again and then it returns. And so at about 14 years old, give or take, usually a little bit into the 14 range, you're dealing with a Saturn opposition. That means that Saturn has gone 180 degrees in the chart and is opposing your natal Saturn. So basically all the freshmen, because around 14, 14 and a half ish is when we are entering high school traditionally in the school system as it is, we are all having this collective experience. And if you have children this age, there's this collective experience of this Saturn opposition, of Saturn opposing where we were. And because Saturn is the energy of discipline and it's the thing we're here to master, and it governs timing and karma and doing things in the right order and integrity, it can feel like an extremely harsh energy. And high school, often people are like, oh, high school was so hard. And it's like, well, the structure of high school, yes, but also the energies that are converging for us are pushing on our points and saying like, what are you going to do with your life? Like, it's not just the inherent structure of high school that's doing that. There is a natural pressure. I would imagine even children that are outside of the traditional school system are still feeling that internal thinking and processing of, okay, like, how does this affect this? How do my choices now create long term? And for you, your mind wasn't thinking, I'm going to do this because it's going to work out great and it's going to open up all these doors. The universe did it for you. The things were constructed for your benefit, even though you were actively fighting against it. It still worked out and it still won out because on a higher level, your soul contracted to say, nope, this is what we're doing, like it or not. And so it still is loving because the long term goals needed to be accomplished, although in the moment it doesn't always feel loving, which is the hallmark of Saturn.
This is so interesting. And especially, I was thinking of apprenticeship and how, when lifespans were a lot shorter, you might start your apprenticeship at age 7 and graduate at age 14. And I
Yeah.
was just Googling this and found that in like the 13 to 1500s, they delayed that and started apprenticeships at 14. Like it just seems like this is a really key age where people naturally are like, okay, what am I going to do with the rest of my life? You know?
Yes.
And so as you were talking about it before we started recording this, I was thinking, of course, my first thought was like, wait a minute, everybody in freshman year is going through some kind of Saturn drama, but it's like how that drama plays out and what it looks like per each individual is going to really depend on their own natal chart. So like
Yes.
my Saturn is sandwiched between two other planets, like pretty tight,
Hmm.
but other people are not going to have super tight stellium right around their Saturn, or they might, maybe they'll have Saturn next to their sun, maybe they'll have Saturn, off by itself, and so everybody is going to have a really different experience and they're going to have different flavors, but we're still having that activation of
Yes.
making us think about what are we really doing, how am I exercising discipline in my life.
Yeah, some of us have a less pronounced Saturn, some of us have a more pronounced Saturn. I had an astrological session years ago, and this astrologer had told me, he said, "You have a super mega ultra exalted Saturn." And I was like, "Oh, could you please break that down for me?" And so like my Saturn return was epically intense and like life leveling. And so like I can see how my Saturn, when I have Saturn transits, they are very, very, very strong. And then I've seen other people where it's like, oh, like if Saturn is like trining your natal sun, that means every time Saturn is activated, you've got the sun involved, just giving like all of this lovely positive energy to the situation or something like that. That's, you can have things that kind of diffuse the energy or lighten the load. And you can have things that are every time it's activated, it's always inflamed and always on fire and always really intense.
Wow. Wow. And so to talk about Saturn for just a second for people that don't really know much about it. So Saturn's on like that 28, 29 year cycle. So every like 28, 29 years when Saturn goes back to where it was when you were born, that's when people typically have some kind of gigantic crisis. It's like a little midlife crisis for you to make you really, really rethink, yeah, how has discipline played into your life? How have you worked with or against the divine timing for your life? Do you have any things you want to share about the Saturn return?
Yes, to me, the Saturn return always looks like you spend the first 28-ish years of your life like setting up your Monopoly board. You know, you're like, I want this and I want this. And you don't really know what you're doing because you've been like sort of have had like you sort of putting it together, but not really being able to think very long term. And so you've got your life together. So around the end of your 20s, you're like, this is great. Like, I've got it figured out. Like, I've done such a great job. And then Saturn return comes and just kind of takes the bottom of the board and is like, boop, and just like disrupts the whole board. And it's like, cool, now that you learned all of that, start over and do it better this time because now you know stuff. And like, I think it's so interesting that like the prefrontal cortex doesn't finish developing until about age 25, give or take. And so like really we tell people like, oh, you're an adult now, like when we're 18 or 21, and we still are children from a developmental standpoint. And so when you look at the astrological timing of things, like that doesn't fully come about until about your mid 20s. And then you have a few more years of looking at the world through new eyes and being like, oh, and that's when you start really understanding how things fit together. I mean, how many of us made very significant life decisions while our prefrontal cortex was not finished developing, like getting married and having children? I know that I decided to get divorced the first time when I was 26, and I just recently put that together. I'm like, that was probably my prefrontal cortex finishing developing, going, this is a really, really bad situation that I've gotten myself into because I didn't have the resources to be making these decisions well. And then by the time I hit my Saturn return, I had made other decisions. The universe was like, nope, not on track. We're going to reset this. And the reset is what's so painful. And it's okay. I didn't do anything wrong. There's nothing wrong with me. I'm not inherently broken. If you're listening and you're like, oh yeah, I made really terrible decisions in my 20s. You didn't. You made the exact decisions that you needed to learn, because the goal isn't to have a perfectly placed board of things laid out. The goal is to learn and to grow. And your learning and growing and our learning and growing is incredibly unique, and it is very, very specific. And so you're winning at life, even if you're looking around, you're like, no, I promise you I'm not winning at life. I guarantee you are, because you're right on track. And Saturn reminds us of that, but it also is constantly course correcting us to the things that we like sacredly agreed to before we took that first breath.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I know a lot of my listeners are have actually experienced two Saturn returns because
Yes.
you get your first one when you're 28, 29. You get your second one when you're like 57, 58. Okay, so if you experienced another big Monopoly board shakeup in your late 50s, that would be what that was. And so I hope that adds a little bit more context. And then people go from their second Saturn return right into their Chiron return, which is,
No, it's 10 years before that, because Chiron is at the end of
gosh,
your
you're right, the
40s.
49.
Yeah. Mhm.
Sorry. Oh my gosh. What is my brain today? I'm like making all these weird mistakes.
It's perfect. And there's so much, it's
That
Mercury retrograde. We'll just call
retrograde.
it that.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Okay. So we go from Chiron return and then like bonk bonk all the way up to our Saturn, second Saturn return. But the point is that all of these planets are always moving to, they're the hands on the clock. And when that little clock hits the little alarm, we get some new placements on the Monopoly board. Yeah, whether we like it or not.
I love it. Yeah,
So
it's all just it's so unexpected, and we fight against so much. But if I've learned anything doing this work, it's that, oh, sweetheart, you're right on time. Like this original story that started this video of like, this is not what I wanted. This is absolutely like I was actively praying for the opposite thing. And then it ended up being perfect and allowed so many other doors to open.
yeah, I mean, God answers our prayers in ways that we don't expect. And sometimes what we think we're asking for is not what we're actually asking for. And sometimes what we are asking for is, I mean, like, God knows that we should be asking for something better, and He's just going to give it to us.
Mhm.
Yeah. So you had mentioned before we sat down to record about the nodal return that happens at age 18. So going
Mhm.
back to our
Yeah.
teenage friends and
Yes.
how, so we head into high school. Well, so at age 12-ish, we have our Jupiter return,
Mhm.
which I'd love if you to talk about that. But let's talk about the timeline really fast. We have Jupiter return at age 12, that's Saturn opposition at uh,
About 14, 14 and a
teenage,
half.
and then the
Mhm.
nodal return at age 18. And so here we have it, a whole bunch of cycles that are coming to fruition right during those teenage years and kind of explaining what the heck is going on with all those weird teenagers.
Yeah, for sure. So a lot of times we ask, we ask kids all the time through high school, what are you going to be when you grow up? What are you doing after high school? Like, especially that senior year. Like, it's almost like if I had a nickel for every time somebody asked me, I just see these teenagers, these seniors, and they're like, please stop asking me, because they don't know often as seniors. Like, some do, and there's a variety of reasons for that, but a lot of times the clarity of what we're doing with our life doesn't come until that first nodal return, which is about 18, 18 and a half. And that's when the nodes of fate, the north node, south node, that are determining our soul path of where we're going and our soul of where we were, it returns to that exact point. And so it's this revisiting of that energy and that contract and saying, hey, remember, this is what you wanted. And it kind of aligns us and it clicks us in. And so a lot of times that's when these young adults are thinking, oh, yeah, now I get it. Now I know what I want to do. And so if you have a young adult in your life that's hesitating, like enrolling in college or picking a career path, like, please don't push them, unless, I mean, sometimes they do need a push. It really is so specific. I know my oldest, he turns 20 this year, and so just observing him and observing his nodal return, I definitely noticed a shift in clarity of like what he's doing and why he's doing it and all of that. It was subtle, but it was definitely there. And now he's gaining traction, and he's taking powerful action towards a goal that he has. And, I'm just here for it. And I'm so glad that I know about astrology and that I've learned the lessons of, not letting my ego drive my parenting, which was definitely one of the hardest things that I had to learn. But just allowing his life to unfold is how I feel prompted with him. But maybe with some of my other children, I might feel more of a like, let me push you, let me gently like kind of help you, because sometimes we need that push and sometimes we need to not be pushed. And um, I was just talking yesterday with a friend, and she was saying with a lot of bitterness, actually, that she wished that her parents had held more strict boundaries with her. And she was upset that they didn't push her more. And I pointed out to her gently, I said, that's so interesting because I guarantee you there's somebody else whose parents did push them, and they deeply, deeply were wounded by that, and they needed to just be loved as they were. She's like, yeah, my parents just loved me and they were just there for me. And I'm like, what's so interesting is her parents didn't inherently do anything wrong. It's not like they were over in the corner shooting up heroin and not caring about her. Like that's a pretty big, clear parenting fail there. But like, you don't know which kids need that consistent, gentle, loving push and which kids need just, I love you. I love you no matter what choices you make. Like, we don't know. And it's okay because we can't screw up our children any more than we're supposed to.
Thank you for saying that. It's very true. All of us are going to be injured by our parents, and all of us are going to injure our children as parents. And we just have to trust that it's exactly unfolding the way that it needs to. And every single human has exactly the trauma that they need for their spiritual journey. And so, not to excuse, like, we need to try our best, and we need to have room for forgiveness for our own parents and for ourselves. And oh man, but what was the thought that I had? Oh, that my little brother, he he told me recently that one of his greatest, like, he's so mad that my parents didn't force him to do more classes. And like, my mom signed him up for everything, and then he wouldn't get in the car. And when you're taller than your mom, what's your mom supposed to do? Like, pick you up and carry? Like, yeah, right, she wasn't going to do that, so she just took him out of everything and let him waste his time all through high school. And he says, oh, now I wish
Yeah.
she would have just made me do it, because I didn't want to, but I really should have. And like, why didn't she just make me? I'm like, I don't know, because you were a foot taller than her and like weighed more. I don't know. Maybe that's why. Maybe because you like
Mhm.
screamed about it and had these giant fits. But like, it's funny how in retrospect we can sit there and say, man, I wish my parents would have done it differently. But in the moment, if my parents had tried to do it differently, that would not have gone very well for anyone involved.
No. And I've noticed in my own healing, like I went through a season of like having so much clarity about what my parents should have done for me, and they should have known this, and just like being so sharp on like I needed this and they dropped the ball, and like all of that layers. And then as I continue through life and life keeps happening to me, and especially as my own children have grown, and to see like I'm flying blind here. Like I have a pretty good idea of what they need, but I don't know to the level that reflecting back on my childhood, like I was sure that they knew and they just didn't. And I'm looking at my kids and I'm like, I feel like I'm pretty connected to them. And I feel like I understand them. And I don't know what are those little inner workings of subtle things that they deeply, desperately need that I can't read, even though I'm trying. It just helped me to drop all of it and be like, wow. Like they're like I was raised by imperfect humans, and honestly they did a great job. My parents are truly amazing people, and like just the level of harshness that I held towards them for so long and in different parts of me, and just to be like, I I know nothing. I'm doing the best I can. And I just keep telling my kids, like, if you only need 6 months of therapy when you're in your 20s, I'm the best mom on the planet. Like, I'm gonna do my best. I'm gonna screw you up. Ultimately, you are responsible for you. Like, that's kind of the tone of my parenting. And I tell them, please come talk to me. If you realize stuff when you're older and be like, hey, you didn't do this for me, I'm like, I will be here for you. I will do my best to not argue with you and tell you that you're wrong. And I love you and I'm sorry and you're welcome.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. It's true. As we dealing with the throes of parenting, I don't know, nothing prepares you for it. I sit there, I'm like, one of my kids is always up to all these shenanigans. I'm like, this would never occur to me. Like, I cannot even
No.
fathom what is going on in your mind that is driving you to do this. But like, how do you handle that when you're like, you're not prepared? You've never had any experience with anyone like this. Now they're your kid, and you're like, oh,
And if you become an expert at your kids, like it's just like I only have three. My parents had 10. Like if somebody only has one, like it just we really all need to stop judging ourselves and stop judging each other
Yes.
for the way that parenting goes down because we just really have no idea.
It's totally true. My first kid, so me and I had a best friend years ago, and we both had our first kids at the same time. And my first kid was such a dreamboat, and he was just quiet and happy, and he just like hung out. And her kid never stopped screaming and never stopped barfing, and like barf everywhere and screaming. And it was so rough, and I was judgy about it. And I just thought, well, if you just did it like me, then your kid would be really great, you know? But then guess what? Then we both had our second kids also within a month of each other. And my second kid was the one that was always barfing and screaming and would never calm it down. And her second kid was the chill dreamboat that just hung out and was happy to be alive, you know? And I thought, oh man, this was not
Humble pie for Allie.
humble pie for Allie. It's true. Like, oh boy, here we go. Guess what? Like every kid is different and
Yeah, it's that second kid that really makes you go, huh? Because I had that dreamboat of a first kid and I was like, I'm the best mom ever. Like, I totally went that route too of like, man, everybody should do it like me. Like, here's the checklist, everyone, be like me. And then as a child, he was the easiest. And then in his teenage years, he definitely gave me a run for my money. And my others that are teenagers now are so easy. And they were so hard when they were little. And it's not even math. Like you can have the hard all the way through. You can have the easy all the way through. Like there's no formula. There's no like, oh, you got this one. That means it's gonna go like this. Nope, nope, nope.
it's true. It's a surprise every time. I guess because we're all just different and we're just here to live our own journey. And as
Yeah,
parents, our job is to kind of, enable the journey in terms of like physical support and emotional support. But a lot of times we have to just watch our kids make decisions that we would never make and say, you know what, that's your decision. And like, this is your experience. And my job is not to control your experience. It's to
100%. And the
support.
closest thing we have to a manual is astrology and human design, where we can go, oh, I see what's going on here. Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm going to be a lot more relaxed about this thing that for me, 10 out of 10, like I would handle this differently, but I can totally see how you would handle this differently. Like that's the closest thing I've come to like having a solid map of something to give me more peace and more clarity and direction.
Yeah, and Naomi does teach a class, Parenting by the Stars. I mean, is that still available for
Yeah,
people?
absolutely.
I would love a link for that to put below,
Mhm.
for anybody that's interested in that. I will say it has been really helpful for me to know about that. Like my one kid that's always making decisions that are baffling to me, she's a rising Aquarius.
Mhm.
Well, when you have a rising Aquarius, you're gonna be relentlessly authentic and make your decisions based on what you feel like doing, even if it doesn't make sense to other people. And that's like, that's what we got, you know? And so
Mhm.
knowing that about her, I can just say, like, you know what? That was her pattern. Her pattern is to come here and do things that I would never think of as a Virgo sun. Like,
Yeah.
it would never occur to me. And like, that is my job. My job is to get over it. And her job is to lean into it, you know? And I mean, man, I can just tell you so many little aspects of my children's charts, knowing them. I mean, my one child that um she has her moon conjunct my Chiron. Your Chiron is your deepest soul wound. Your moon is like your internal like feelings. And so her big emotional outbursts always like trigger me so much, you know? And I'm like, but knowing that has helped me so much to be like, okay, like I still lose it sometimes, but knowing that that is the dynamic has changed
100%.
the
Oh
dynamic
yeah.
because now I can say, oh, no, I'm being triggered because like her moon is just like rubbing right against the burlap sack of my soul and like it's itchy and I don't like it, but that is the pattern and like my job is to once again for me to get over it and for her to lean into it. Like as parents, we get to learn how to take the higher road and taking the high ground, you know, and learn how to show that unconditional love towards our children that can be difficult at times, but it's not realistic to expect that kind of understanding from our children. Like we get to expect it from us or like
Yes, they are developing. They need our stability so that they can grow into who they are. Absolutely. It is not a two-way street with children, for
right.
sure.
Like I just want to be clear about that because when I say it's my job to get over it and her job to lean into it, I'm not saying that like our job is to ignore our feelings. Our job is
Yeah.
to like, you know, let other people walk all over us. It's rather that like in that parent-child
Yes.
stewardship situation, our job is to transcend our natural triggers, to hold space for people that naturally trigger us, which is the hardest job. I mean, I don't know. I think it is the hardest job. It's the best job, most worthwhile job, and a super hard job because this is what helps us develop our most divine qualities.
I totally agree. Between parenting and marriage, for those that are in that as well, like nothing calls up our childhood wounding and the areas where the ball was dropped and things were let go of than our marriage or our children. And because they do strike at that most intimate core part of us, it's it is like the deepest soul refinement, and most of us feel like we're failing at it all the time. But and we have glimmers of like it going great, but like it's actually a really, really beautiful life experience that I'm so grateful I've had the privilege to have, because not everybody gets to have that opportunity.
I was just gonna say, I think that the biggest refining moments are the marriage or the children, or the not being
The
married when
lack of marriage and the
lack of
lack of
children
children.
when you want
Mhm.
children. Like, but I it's like two sides of the same coin because
Yeah.
those two things, having them or not having them when you want them, like those are the things that are going to drive every single person to really get real about what is going on in their soul,
Yeah.
whether they want to or not.
And that's where you come in.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I hope this was helpful and interesting and useful in making sense of your own teenagers or your own self as you were a teenager. Um, Thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe. I'm going to link Naomi's YouTube channel below as well. So go check out her channel. She has a class on parenting by the stars, which I actually have not taken it, but I fully trust it is super, super helpful. And do you have to have an astrological background? Do you have to know anything to take that class?
Not at all. It is very fundamental and teaches absolutely from the most basic, not only astrology, but I added the human design component in the last year as well. And it will definitely give you the map so that you can like kind of draw out for each of your children to begin to understand them on the most fundamental level. And of course you can keep going deeper. I've got tons of stuff, but that is a really excellent, like, I don't know the first thing about this. It's cool. I've got you. That's kind of where I shine, is taking things to the most basic and making them relevant.
Yeah, perfect. So if you don't know anything, but you want to know something, that is the right class for you. So you can start learning how to relate to your children in ways that they understand and ways that they can connect to you back. So um okay, well, thanks, guys. And remember, we're still in our 30-day challenge. It's almost over and we're all rocking it 100%. But be sure to write your pages today, front, back, front. I'll put the link to that below if you have no idea what I'm talking about. Thank you again, Naomi, and we'll talk to you later.
Yeah, this was wonderful. Thank you so much, Allie.